Assalamu alaikum dear students. Welcome to the course of International Relations for undergraduate classes conducted by COMSET Institute of Information Technology, Virtual Campus Islamabad. Dear students, let's have a short summary of our previous lecture. Previous lecture में हमने पाकिस्तान foreign policy को discuss किया था. And in that we discussed first of all what is foreign policy. So foreign policy is a systematic plan. It's the intention, it's the aspiration and ideals of any country on how to deal with its neighbors. So foreign policy actually regulates the relations between states. एक मुल्क जब किसी दूसरे मुल्क के साथ ताल्लुकात इस्तेवार करता है, उसके साथ राब्ता करता है, तो उसके कौन सी पॉलिसी है, आखिर वो क्या चाहता है, आखिर इसके गोल्स क्या हैं, आखिर इसके मकासद क्या हैं. तो ये जो एक सिस्टमेटिक प्लान एक स्टेट बनाता है which determines the relation of that state with another state, what kind of objectives and what kind of aspirations the state have. So foreign policy helps the government in conducting relation with other states. Then we discuss the guiding principles of Pakistan foreign policy. पाकिस्तान की फॉरेन पॉलिसी को कौन से असूल गाइड करते हैं. तो ये कुछ असूल है जिसमें फ्रीडम एंड सॉवरेंटी है, which means the Pakistan foreign policy would be guided by protecting the freedom of the country and sovereignty of the country. हमने अपने मुल्क की सरहदों को बचाना है, अपनी आज़ादी को बरकरार रखना है, because we got independence after many sacrifices. The second is that Pakistan would establish good relations with the Muslim countries. क्योंकि पाकिस्तान खुद एक आइडियोलॉजिकल स्टेट है, पाकिस्तान खुद एक इस्लामी रियासत है, इसीलिए पाकिस्तान would establish good and friendly relations with all Muslim states because all Muslims are brothers and this would form a Muslim community or Muslim Ummah. Pakistan would also be obeying and following the UN Charter. जो भी UN का चार्टर है, जो भी उसके मकासद हैं, so Pakistan would be wholly supportive of that charter. Pakistan would be wholly and fully supporting the resolutions passed by that international organization. इसके साथ Pakistan would also help in achieving world peace, जो कि ना सिर्फ UN का ऑब्जेक्टिव है, लेकिन पाकिस्तान की फॉरेन पॉलिसी का गाइडिंग प्रिंसिपल है. Pakistan does not have any aggressive designs against other state. Pakistan is a peace-loving state, and for this purpose, Pakistan has sent many times its troops to other countries. For what purpose? For peacekeeping, for establishing peace, for prevention of the violation of human rights in those countries which are hit by some conflicts. इसी के साथ Pakistan troops also helped in establishing the infrastructure in those countries and also to assist the people in having health facilities and medical facilities as well. Pakistan is now adopting a foreign policy of non-alignment. ये World War I के दौरान Pakistan in the initial phase showed a tilt towards US, but later on Pakistan realized the consequences of that foreign policy and therefore adopted a neutral attitude that it will adopt and it will establish good relations with both the camps, with the communist bloc as well as capitalistic bloc. Pakistan would always help the people who are fighting for their self-determination, who are struggling for their self-determination. क्योंकि हमने खुद आज़ादी अपनी जदोजहद से हासिल की है, तो जो कौमें अभी तक आज़ाद नहीं हुई and they are struggling against their rights and their freedom, जिस तरह कश्मीरी हैं, जिस तरह Palestinian people हैं, so Pakistan would be supportive of that struggle and would be providing them all kind of moral and diplomatic support. Pakistan believe in disarmament. Pakistan is against the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons and technology. Pakistan does not want the expansion of nuclear technology to other countries for destructive purpose. Pakistan stress at the peaceful use of the nuclear technology. फिर हमने objectives of Pakistan foreign policy किया. What are the objective of Pakistan foreign policy? आखिर इसके मकासद क्या हैं? So the first objective is that the foreign policy would try to make Pakistan a dynamic and progressive state. We have to show to the world that we are not conservative, we are not an extremist state. Rather, Pakistan has a moderate society and it's a dynamic, progressive state. Similarly, our objective would be to establish friendly relations with all states. जो भी हमारे neighbors हैं उनके साथ भी अच्छे ताल्लुकात हों, मुस्लिम कंट्रीज़ के साथ भी अच्छे ताल्लुकात हों. इसके अलावा जो बाकी कंट्रीज़ हैं और सुपर पावर्स हैं और यूरोपियन कंट्रीज़ हैं, पाकिस्तान would establish friendly relations with all countries of the Muslim and of the world and does not have any discrimination towards any state. Pakistan foreign policy would aim at bringing national security and national interest, जो हमारे national interest हैं, उनकी protection and promotion would be the cornerstone and would be the main objective of our foreign policy. Pakistan foreign policy would be supportive of self-determination. Pakistan foreign policy would also help in establishing commercial and economic cooperation with the other states. Pakistan would establish good business relations with other states. पाकिस्तान का जो इंटरेस्ट है, जो उसकी प्रेस्टीज है, जो उसकी रिकॉग्निशन है, जो उसका हॉनर है, पाकिस्तान फॉरेन पॉलिसी would aim at maintaining that prestige. Pakistan foreign policy would struggle to make Pakistan a respectable state, an honorable state where the people of Pakistan would be respected. So Pakistan ने अपना एक पॉजिटिव इमेज बनाना है और बाहर की दुनिया में इसको रिफ्लेक्ट भी करना है. Then there were some challenges to Pakistan foreign policy. What are those challenges? The first challenge is post 9/11 security concern. कि after 9/11 के बाद पाकिस्तान की जो सिक्योरिटी है उसको काफ़ी ख़तरात लाहक हैं, ना सिर्फ इंडिया से बल्कि इसके बाद जो अपनी अंदरूनी ग्रुप्स हैं जो कि एक्सट्रीमिस्ट ग्रुप्स हैं. So Pakistan is also facing various kind of threats and concern from these kind of groups, and therefore Pakistan foreign policy has these challenges, how to deal with these people, how to make a foreign policy and make the true picture of Pakistan as a progressive Islamic country and is not belonging to these extremist groups. Pakistan has to safeguard its sovereignty now. There are many kinds of attacks on Pakistan. These attacks are not only coming from these few organizations and few groups which are found in Pakistan, but is also coming from the Western in the form of drone attacks. So जो drone attacks हैं, it is a violation of Pakistan's sovereignty. It is a violation of the international border of Pakistan. So Pakistan has to adopt a particular stand and how to deal with these kind of attacks and also to maintain its sovereignty. पाकिस्तान को एक terrorist का label दिया जा रहा है. It is termed as a rogue state, which is not right. Pakistan also has to struggle and has to make efforts in order to eradicate, in order to remove this kind of label. इसके बाद बलूचिस्तान का इशू है जहाँ पे different groups involved है. इसके साथ foreign interference पे भी वहाँ पे हो रहा है. So Pakistan also have to deal with these and has to show the world that Balochistan issue is an internal issue and that's not a struggle for freedom rights. Rather, it's only a few groups who are extremist and they have some other objectives because of the interference of the foreign hands. इसके अलावा पाकिस्तान में स्पोर्ट एक्टिविटीज़ नहीं हो रहे, बाहर से मुख्तलिफ जो गेम्स हैं वो टीमें यहाँ पे नहीं आ रही हैं. Foreign investment is also declining. Pakistan also has to struggle against these objectives and these kind of issues and problems. So these are some of the challenges to Pakistan foreign policy, and we also discussed the strategies for removing these problems. So this was all for the previous lecture. Let's start our today's lecture, which is about US foreign policy. So we are discussing the foreign policy of major countries, and in this I have chosen US as the only superpower existing at present. तो US की जो foreign policy है वो कैसी है, इसमें हम जो topics discuss करेंगे, so these topics are basic principles of US foreign policy before 1945. Then what are the major goals of US foreign policy? Who are involved in US foreign policy? The change in US foreign policy after World War II. Tools for the conduct of foreign policy. Then we would discuss US relations. In this, we would first of all discuss US relation with Soviet Union or Russia now, and second is US relation with Pakistan. So let us start our today's lecture with the basic principles of US foreign policy. तो US की जो foreign policy है उसके main principles क्या हैं, उसके बुनियादी असूल क्या हैं? So let us understand this. First of all, let us see what is the actual location of America. So America or US is located in North America, the North America continent, and it was completely cut off from the rest of the world because it is itself a continent. तो जो अमेरिका की लोकेशन है वो मगरबी अमेरिका का जो बर आज़म है वहाँ पे है और इसीलिए ये यूरोप से कटा हुआ है. Thus it adopted a policy of isolation from its independence to beginning of 20th century. And therefore, because it was cut off from Europe and from Asia and from Africa, इसीलिए जो US की foreign policy का एक basic principle रहा है तो वो isolation का रहा है. Isolation means that it was not involved with the rest of the world. It did not care about the rest of the world. It followed its own policy, and because it was separated from other countries, therefore it was not worried about establishing relations with other countries. तो इसने एक isolation की policy को अपनाया हुआ था since its independence to the beginning of 20th century. Because of its isolationist policy, it was not interested in any territorial or economic interest from other states. Thus it faced no hostility from other states as was persistent in Europe since several centuries. तो यूरोप की कंट्रीज को जिन मसाइल का सामना था वो अमेरिका के पास उन मसाइल का सामना नहीं था. ये उसको एक एडवांटेज रहा है कि अमेरिका was free from the conflicts of Europe because there is a large distance between Europe continent and America. तो यूरोप में जितनी भी शोरशें या इंस्टेबिलिटी रही है या स्ट्रगल फॉर पावर रही है तो अमेरिका उससे महफूज रहा. क्यों रहा? बिकॉज इट वॉज लोकेटेड इन एन आइसोलेटेड प्लेस एंड देयरफॉर दैट डिस्टर्बेंस डिड नॉट मूव और शिफ्टेड टुवर्ड्स अमेरिका. इसी के साथ यूएस का अपना भी कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं रहा with establishing relation with other countries. It was not worried about any economic interest or trade from other states. It did not have any ambitious design of gaining more territory. जिस तरह यूरोप की जो कंट्रीज हैं उनका ये एक एम्बिशन रहा, एक मकसद रहा कि to gain more land, to gain more territory. Therefore they went on different kind of expeditions. They went on different kind of attacks. And therefore they established colonies in Asia and Africa. जबकि अमेरिका का ये इंटरेस्ट कभी नहीं रहा क्योंकि वो इन पॉलिटिक्स से ज़रा सा हटके था और इसने खुद भी ये पॉलिसी इख्तियार नहीं किया. इट डिड नॉट वरी अबाउट अदर कंट्रीज क्योंकि जो फाउंडिंग फादर्स हैं, फाउंडिंग फादर्स कौन है? ये वो लीडर्स हैं जिन्होंने यूएस की बुनियाद रखी थी. जब यूएस की कुछ रियासतें वजूद में आई और जिन्होंने अपनी आज़ादी ब्रिटिश से डिक्लेयर किया, ब्रिटिश से वो आज़ाद हुए क्योंकि ये जो रियासतें थीं they were firstly controlled by and they were colonies of Britain. So these states united together and they declared their independence under these founding fathers. तो ये जो states हैं इनको कहा जाने लगा United States, and they were established for making their own defense and their own country, and they declared independence from British. तो इसीलिए ये किसी और कॉलोनीज में इंटरेस्टेड नहीं थे क्योंकि ये खुद कॉलोनी रह चुके थे. सो दे वर नॉट interested in becoming or in getting colonies in other parts of the world. Rather, they were struggling that all the colonies should be independent. Liberty and equality principle occupied an important position in US administration and policies. It got independence from British in 18th century, and thus respect for democratic principles and liberty is highly valued in US foreign policy. तो जिस तरह जिक्र किया गया कि जो US के स्टेट्स थे, इनिशियल स्टेट्स जिनको फाउंडिंग फादर ने बनाया, इस्टेब्लिश किया, और इट फॉर्म द बेसिस ऑफ यूनाइटेड स्टेट एट प्रेजेंट. सो बिकॉज दे वर कॉलोनीज, therefore when they declared independence, so from that because they struggled for their own independence, इसीलिए इनका एक एम्बिशन ये रहा, एक मकसद ये रहा कि जो अपनी आज़ादी है उसको बरकरार रखा जाए, अपनी जो लिबर्टी है, अपनी जो फ्रीडम है उसको मेंटेन किया जाए. और इसीलिए दे वर नॉट वरीड अबाउट अदर कंट्रीज, अदर स्टेट्स, दे वर मोर इंटरेस्टेड इन देयर ओन एग्जिस्टेंस. फाउंडिंग फादर का कभी ये ख्याल नहीं रहा, कभी ये ख्वाब नहीं रहा कि अमेरिका बाकी स्टेट्स में इंटरफेयर करे. इसीलिए they only founded America on the principles of adopting its own policy and not to have any antagonistic policy towards other states. This America was founded in the late 18th century. और इनका जो मेन प्रिंसिपल है, जिनका फोकस रहा है इनकी फॉरेन पॉलिसी का, उसमें है लिबर्टी एंड इक्वालिटी. लिबर्टी अपनी आज़ादी और इक्वालिटी और सारों की बराबरी, which means they were struggling for democratic principles. They were struggling for the independence and to get their own democratic rights. इसीलिए जो यूएस की फॉरेन पॉलिसी है उसके ये जो असूल हैं ये काफ़ी उसका महवर रहे हैं, उसका फोकस रहे हैं. So now let us discuss what are the major goals of US foreign policy. अमेरिका की जो फॉरेन पॉलिसी है उसके मेजर गोल्स क्या हैं, वो क्या चाहते हैं, वो किस चीज़ को अचीव करना चाहते हैं. सो देयर आर सम. नंबर 1 इज प्रोटेक्टिंग US टेरिटोरियल इंटीग्रिटी, which means the cornerstone, the main goal, the main objective of US foreign policy is to protect its territory. और ये सिर्फ यूएस का नहीं है, ये बल्कि हर रियासत का बुनियादी असूल है कि पहले उन्होंने अपनी आज़ादी को बरकरार रखना है, जो अपनी सरहदें हैं उनकी हिफाजत करना है, जितनी भी उसकी टेरिटरी है उसको इंटैक्ट रखना है. सो दिस इज़ द मेजर गोल ऑफ US foreign policy, to protect its territorial integrity, to protect not only the land of US but also to protect its embassies, जो इसके सफारत खाने हैं उनकी भी प्रोटेक्शन करे, and safeguarding one's military forces stationing in or visiting other countries. तो ना सिर्फ अपने सरहदों की हिफाजत करना है बल्कि जो इसकी अपनी सासें हैं जिसमें एम्बेसीज आते हैं, जिसमें मुख्तलिफ़ किस्म के सफारत खाने, कौंसल खाने वगैरह आते हैं, तो उनकी भी हिफाजत करना है. इसके अलावा जो इसकी अपनी फ़ौजी मिशंस हैं या फ़ौजी बेसिस हैं, चाहे वो मुल्क के अंदर हैं चाहे वो मुल्क से बाहर हैं, तो US की फॉरेन पॉलिसी वुड बी एम्ड एट प्रोटेक्टिंग these assets as well, these bases as well, the protection of the land, the protection of embassies, the protection of the military force, their bases and the soldiers and all the things which are related to these things, and protection of all states and states institutions. और जितनी भी इसकी रियासतें हैं, क्योंकि अमेरिका मुख्तलिफ रियासतों से मिलके बना है, तो सारे स्टेट्स की प्रोटेक्शन और स्टेट्स में जितने भी उनके एसेट्स हैं, उनके असासजात हैं, सारों की हिफाजत करना. सो दिस इज़ द फारमोस्ट objective of US foreign policy. The second is protecting the territorial integrity of allies, which means US not only wants to protect itself, लेकिन उसके जो दोस्त ममालिक हैं, इसके जो दोस्त हैं, उनकी भी प्रोटेक्शन चाहता है. Remember, now we are discussing the major goals of US foreign policy at present. We would study the change, कि आखिर ये change कब से आया, लेकिन अभी जो existing goals of US foreign policy है, so we are discussing that. So in that, US is also trying to protect the territorial integrity of its allies. जितने भी इसके दोस्त ममालिक हैं, जो इसके इत्तेहादी हैं, तो US उनकी भी प्रोटेक्शन चाहता है, जिसमें नेटो मेंबर्स हैं, वो कंट्रीज दैट आर द मेंबर ऑफ नेटो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. इसके अलावा इसके जो एशिया में दोस्त हैं, जिसमें साउथ कोरिया है, जिस तरह जापान है, इसराइल है, so America is also trying to protect its allies, and therefore its foreign policy is focused on the protection of these allies as well. The third is maintaining the international balance of power, ensuring that no state becomes so strong to become a threat to its neighbors, for example Iraq, Syria. क्योंकि अमेरिका इस वक्त सबसे बड़ी सुपर पावर है, इसके सामना कोई और स्टेट नहीं कर रहा, इसके पास अपना कोई कंपटीटर मौजूद नहीं है, और इसीलिए यूएस is trying to establish such a system in which there is balance of power in the whole world, which means US does not want that in a particular region one country is very strong, because if one country becomes very strong, it can be a threat to the security of other states. तो अमेरिका की ये एक पॉलिसी है कि जो दुनिया है वहाँ पे कोई भी ऐसी पावर ज़्यादा स्ट्रांग ना हो, इसीलिए it tries to maintain balance of power in most of the regions. For example, जिस तरह इराक का मामला है कि when in Gulf the Iraq power was increasing, and therefore US feels that Iraq has become a threat, and when Iraq attacked Kuwait and was a threat to the security of other states, then America intervened, and therefore through the Gulf War the power of Iraq was lowered, the power of Iraq was decreased. As a result, peace was again restored in the region and balance of power was restored. So this is how America foreign policy is aimed at maintaining balance of power, ताकि कोई भी power इतनी strong ना हो कि it becomes a threat to the security of the other states. The fourth is fostering international security through the United Nations, because UN is an international organization and most of its headquarters are also in America, and America is also the biggest donor to United Nations. और इस तरह जितने भी इसके एजेंसीज हैं और जो इसकी एफर्ट्स हैं और स्ट्रगल है, तो बाकायदा अमेरिका उसमें मदद करता है. So therefore through the medium of UN, America is maintaining different types of peacekeeping missions in the world. इसी तरह जो UN है उसका भी ये बाकायदा एक ऑब्जेक्टिव है कि दुनिया में अमन कायम रहे, and there should be no country which should be a threat to the international peace. So while the UN is trying to maintain peace, America is also struggling along with the UN and trying to establish peace through the medium of UN. जिस तरह हम देख सकते हैं कि जिस तरह Gulf, when there was tension in the Gulf region and Iraq was becoming a threat, therefore US intervened in that war and it was helping, it was assisting United Nations in bringing peace in that region. इसी तरह बोस्निया peacekeeping mission है जिसमें when the conflict and the tension increases in Bosnia, so UN with the help of United States and NATO members, the peace was restored, and there were different types of activities taken by US and the NATO members in order to establish peace in that region. Similarly, Kosovo hai, similarly Afghanistan hai, where the NATO members in cooperation with ISAF forces established peace, and destroyed and damaged the powers of Taliban and Al-Qaeda leaders. The fifth goal is protecting access to strategic resources, not only of its own but also to other states, and ensuring a strict command and control system of strategic resources. कि जो भी strategic resources हैं और हसास असासें हैं और मकामात हैं, तो अमेरिका की ये भी एक मेन पॉलिसी है, उसका एक मेन गोल है कि ये जो असासें हैं, ये जो ख़तरनाक और sophisticated assets हैं, so they should be well protected, they should be well guarded, they should be under very strict command and control. They should not be under the use of any particular agency. इसका जो इस्तेमाल है, इसका जो एप्लीकेशन है, वो सिर्फ एक स्टेट के पास ना हो, एक बॉडी के पास ना हो, बल्कि it should be very strict and very systematic. So America safeguards all these kind of strategic assets and strategic places and maintains a very strict command and control. ना सिर्फ अपने असासे बल्कि इसके अलावा जो बाकी ममालिक हैं और जो उनके स्ट्रेटेजिक एसेट्स हैं, अमेरिका आल्सो इंश्योर दैट दोस एसेट्स आर आल्सो अंडर स्ट्रिक्ट कमांड एंड कंट्रोल, ताकि ऐसा ना हो कि जो सासें हैं दे गो टू द इन द हैंड्स ऑफ extremist groups or the other warring groups, and therefore the world peace is threatened. So America is constantly trying that all these kind of strategic resources and the strategic assets, they are in the safe hand and under very strict command and control system. The next goal of US foreign policy is maintaining international legal principles. जो भी बैनुल-अक़वामी कवानीन है, जो भी बैनुल-अक़वामी कायदे हैं, तो यूएस चाहता है कि ये जो बैनुल-अक़वामी कवानीन है या असूल है, ये सारे स्टेट उसको फॉलो करें, इसके ऊपर कोई कन्फ्लिक्ट ना हो. Every state should be abiding by these kind of for the international policies and international principles so that there comes no conflict. For example, freedom of high seas. जो समंदर है वहाँ पे free movement हो. There should be freedom of navigation, ताकि ऐसे states अगर उनके बीच में जंगे हों और कोई तीसरा neutral state की ship जा रही हो, so that ship should be allowed of the free movement and no restriction should be placed on the freedom of movement in the high oceans and the sea. The seventh is furthering the interest of American business and fostering modernization and economic development. Because a country wants economic independence, a country also wants economic development, and for this there should be a complete market policies, there should be independence in the trade policies, and the country should be allowed to freely propagate and export its products and also import whatever is the requirement. So therefore America is trying that whatever is the interest of America, its business, its industries, so their interests are safeguarded. जो यूएस की इंडस्ट्रीज़ हैं, जो वहाँ की फैक्ट्रीज़ हैं, जो बिजनेसमैन क्लास है, जो वर्किंग क्लास है, तो उन सारों के जो इंटरेस्ट हैं, उनके जो राइट्स हैं, वो प्रोटेक्टेड हों. अमेरिका enjoys the free movement and free trade with all the countries, and therefore it also tries to protect its interest in different regions. इसी तरह it also ensure that there should be free and open market policies. The market should be open to all, and all the countries have the right to bring their products into that open market, and they should be sold on the competitive basis, on the quality basis, on the prestige of the product and not on the prestige of the state. So this is how America wants to adopt and wants to ensure that there should be free market policies, and the business community, its own industry, it is also safe and their interests are also safeguarded. इसके बाद America also want to safeguard the interest of its American nationals in foreign countries, their security and rights. जो भी अमेरिका के बाशिंदे हैं, ज़ाहिरी बात है हर एक स्टेट चाहेगा कि इसके जो बाशिंदे हैं, जो सिटीजन्स हैं, when they are traveling in other countries, so their rights are also protected. And for this purpose, the diplomatic service, the diplomacy, and the ambassadors of the country are always there for the help. So America always also try that the interest of American nationals and the citizens are also safeguarded and their rights are not abrogated. They are given full security while moving throughout the world. And lastly, US foreign policy also aim at protecting human rights, the democratic institutions and other American values. क्योंकि जिस तरह पहले बताया कि America was a colony and therefore it has more respect for human values, for human rights, for independence, for liberty, and that's the main principles which are followed in American foreign policy. So America tries to protect these principles कि जहाँ पे भी human rights violation हो रही हो, America would be strictly criticizing the violation of those human rights. It tries to establish democratic principles and democratic kind of governments and the strengthening of democratic institutions in the countries of the world. जिसमें we see that America opposes dictatorial and military regimes in the states. अगर किसी country में military governments हो या dictatorial government हो, so America would not be establishing relation with that state. America would oppose that kind of government. It will not be friendly towards that government because that's an oppressive government. That's not a democratic government. इसी तरह America opposes unconstitutional change of elected governments. ऐसे countries जहाँ पे अगर government को गैर आइनी तरीके से change किया जा रहा हो, उसको तब्दील किया जा रहा हो, and the change is not on the vote, the change is not on the election, America foreign policy always aimed at opposing that kind of change because it want democratic form of government, it want the democratic principles and the democratic institutions to be enforced in the country. And respect for human rights such as women's rights and child rights, because America claims to be the big champion of human rights. It tries to protect human rights, and therefore for protecting human rights there are various resolutions which are being passed by UN. तो ये जो UN के resolutions हैं, America is trying to protect and promote these kind of human rights, and therefore in most of the country even we can see that those resolutions of UN have been adopted. और हर एक कंट्री अब कोशिश करती है कि जो ह्यूमन राइट्स हैं, ये जो वुमेन राइट्स हैं, इसी तरह चाइल्ड अब्यूज़ है या चाइल्ड राइट्स हैं, so these rights are safeguarded and protected and promoted. So these were some of the main goals of US foreign policy. These foreign policy objectives are divided into high politics and low politics. अब क्वेश्चन ये है कि what is high politics and what is low politics? So high politics refer to the political and military relationship between states. For example, item 1 through 6 belong to high politics. So high politics refer to such elements, they refers to such policies which brings or which relates to political and military relationship. जहाँ पे फौजी ताल्लुकात आते हों, जहाँ पे फौजी एक्शन हो सकता हो, जिसका ताल्लुक military action and political action से हुआ, so such kind of politics are called high politics. While in low politics, this military and political relationship is not involved. Rather, it involves economic, social and cultural relationship. जहाँ पे माशी या माशरती रिलेशन हो, जहाँ पे चीज़ें इनसे डील करती हो, तो ऐसे अनासिर को, ऐसे एलिमेंट को हम लाएंगे लो पॉलिटिक्स में, जबकि हाई पॉलिटिक्स में वो एलिमेंट्स आते हैं जिनका ताल्लुक फौजी सतह से हुआ या सियासी सतह से हुआ. So they are basically involving government and army, while in low politics comes economic, social and cultural relationship between states. If you just see the items from 7 through 10, जो हमने goals of US foreign policy किए, तो उसमें जो आखिरी 4 आइटम्स हैं जो कि 7 से लेके 10 पे बयान किए गए हैं, so they are related to economic, social and cultural relationship. जबकि 1 to 6 जो एलिमेंट्स थे, जो गोल्स थे, सो दे आर रिलेटेड टू हाई पॉलिटिक्स। अगर हम दोनों का मवाजना करें तो हाई पॉलिटिक्स की अहमियत ज़्यादा है, इसका वेटेज ज़्यादा है, इसकी इंपॉर्टेंस लो पॉलिटिक्स के मुकाबले में ज़्यादा आती है। सो हाई पॉलिटिक्स हैज़ प्रेफरेंस ओवर लो पॉलिटिक्स इन द कंडक्ट ऑफ कंट्रीज फॉरेन पॉलिसीज। अब सवाल ये है कि अमेरिका में आखिर फॉरेन पॉलिसी कौन डील करता है? व्हाट इज़ द एजेंसी और व्हाट इज़ द इंस्टीट्यूशन दैट कंट्रोल्स फॉरेन पॉलिसी? So if we look at the structure of America and the government structure, so we see that there is the Congress जो उसका legislature है, और फिर वहाँ पे judiciary है, and then we have the executive branch. Executive branch में US president आते हैं, and US president does not sit in the legislature because in US we have a presidential form of government. क्योंकि वहाँ के प्रेसिडेंट होते हैं और सारी पावर उनके पास होती है। द प्रेसिडेंट इज नॉट अ मेंबर ऑफ लेजिस्लेचर, और वहाँ की जो लेजिस्लेचर है उसका नाम कांग्रेस है, जिसके दो ब्रांचेस हैं या दो हाउसेस हैं। एक जो लोअर हाउस है उसे हाउस ऑफ रिप्रेजेंटेटिव कहते हैं, और जो अपर हाउस है उसे सेनेट कहते हैं। सेनेट हैज मेंबर्स कमिंग फ्रॉम different states, while in House of Representative the people chose their representatives directly, so they are basically popular representation, while in Senate there is state representation. जो executive power है वो president के पास है, because president has the supreme executive function. So the executive has the primary responsibility for making and implementing foreign policy. तो यूएस के जो सिस्टम में द एग्जीक्यूटिव हु इज द प्रेसिडेंट, सो ही हैज गॉट द फुल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, ही हैज गॉट द प्राइमरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी फॉर मेकिंग एंड इम्प्लीमेंटिंग फॉरेन पॉलिसी। एंड अंडर द प्रेसिडेंट देन देयर कम्स द सेक्रेटरी, जो कि हम जिसको मिनिस्टर कह सकते हैं। सो द सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल टू द प्रेसिडेंट, एंड द सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट अगेन कैन नॉट बी अ मेंबर ऑफ द लेजिस्लेचर. President can take a member from the legislature, but then that member is not responsible to legislature. Rather, the member is responsible to the president. The president can elect the member, select the member, and can also remove the member as he likes, and not the parliament, which is basically the Congress. So the president of US is a very powerful person. He is not only the chief executive, but is also the chief diplomat. He is also the commander-in-chief. He is the chief economist, and he is the national spokesperson. मतलब है कि because he is the head of the executive, and all other departments and the head of the departments who are the secretary of states, so they are also under the president. तो president जिस तरह चाहता है उसी तरह वो policy design कर सकता है. So he is the chief executive, he is the chief diplomat. जितने भी डिप्लोमेट्स हैं वो उन सारों का हेड है. वो जो चाहता है, जैसी पॉलिसी चाहता है वैसे ही वो बना सकता है. Even the army is under the president because he is the commander in chief. However, in working, the president is assisted by a large foreign policy establishment office. जो उनका foreign office है, it is working under president. ज़ाहिर बात है जो secretary of state है, he would be the heading the foreign office, and then the secretary of state is responsible to the president. So ultimately president controls all these foreign offices and the establishment. So president is being held by the foreign office through different types of expertise and personnel which are there to provide advice to the president, and then the president can take decision. The legislative branch share many responsibility as a junior partner. Congress must appropriate all funds that are spent on foreign policy initiatives and sanction foreign aid or grants to other countries. अब जिस तरह यूएस प्रेसिडेंट चाहता है उस तरह वो पॉलिसी बना देता है, और सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट जिसको वो सिलेक्ट करता है तो वो जो उनके प्रेसिडेंट के अंडर होता है, एंड देन दैट ऑफिस that department is also again under president. So foreign policy is basically the handwork of the president. But as a legislature, the Congress also has some function in controlling some of the foreign policy. वो कैसे कर सकता है? वो ऐसे कर सकता है कि Congress appropriate funds that are spent on foreign policy initiatives, कि अपनी foreign policy को implement करने के लिए जो funds की ज़रूरत होती है, जो पैसे दरकार होते हैं, तो वो पैसे कहाँ से आते हैं, वो funds कहाँ से आते हैं? So that funds are approved by the legislature, that is sanctioned by, that is approved by, that is discussed by the legislature. Therefore, legislature can impose some cuts. It can decrease the budget. It can increase the budget which has to be given to a country or can be used for different kind of aids or for different types of foreign policy initiatives. तो इसी तरह जो foreign aid है या जो grants हैं, that has to be given to other countries. So the legislature has the control on these foreign aids and the grants which are to be given. And as a result, the US president has to rely upon the legislature. उन्होंने request करनी होगी to the legislature to appropriate, to approve, to sanction the funds that is needed for the foreign policy. Similarly, the Congress has the power to declare war. President foreign policy को तो implement करता है, लेकिन उसके पास war declare करने की जरूरत नहीं है. उसके पास ये पावर नहीं है कि वो वॉर का ऐलान कर सके, कि वो ऐलान जंग कर सके, बल्कि ऐलान जंग किसका काम है? It is the function of Congress. Only Congress can declare war. But remember, US president has got such a power that he can create such a situation, he can create such a time where actually US would be at war with the country. तो US president ऐसे हालात बना सकता है, वो ऐसी सिचुएशन क्रिएट कर सकता है, ऐसे मौके बना देता है कि जिसमें US बाकायदा एक मुल्क के साथ जंग की हालत में आ जाता है. तो जब नौबत यहाँ तक पहुँच जाती है तो अल्टीमेटली फिर कांग्रेस ने वार को डिक्लेयर करना होता है, क्योंकि अदरवाइज द US वुड बी एट डिफेंडिंग पोजीशन एंड कांग्रेस वुड नॉट बी डिक्लेयरिंग वॉर, जिसकी वजह से मुल्क को नुकसान पहुँच सकता है. तो अगेन यहाँ पे जो प्रेसिडेंट का रोल है वो फिर भी बढ़ जाता है. वो ऐसे हालात बना देता है, ऐसी इमरजेंसी के हालात इख्तियार कर लेता है कि जिसकी वजह से द कांग्रेस हैज़ टू डिक्लेयर वॉर. बट अगेन द पावर इज विद द कांग्रेस टू डिक्लेयर वॉर. इसी तरह although all military actions since World War II have been taken by President initiative without a formal declaration of war, कि जिस तरह मैंने बता दिया कि US प्रेसिडेंट ऐसे हालात बना देता है कि जिसमें अल्टीमेटली अमेरिका इज एट वॉर and therefore the Congress has to go and therefore it has to go and give different funds and sanction different money and budgets for the US president to pursue war. इसी तरह जो एक और निहायत ही अहम पावर है वो है the Senate must approve treaties. जो इसका अपर हाउस है उसने जितने भी मुआहदे अमेरिका करता है, so the Senate has to approve those treaties. Remember, it is a very big power with the Senate. कि जो भी मुआहदे या एग्रीमेंट्स US साइन करता है उसके बाद वो मुआहदा जाएगा and this has to be discussed in the Senate, and then the Senate after discussion then it can go and approve the treaty or it can even reject the treaty. So if the treaty is rejected by US Senate, then the US President would excuse for the disapproval and then that treaty will not be put into force with the other state. इसमें जो सबसे अहम ट्रीटी है तो वो लीग ऑफ नेशन की है कि व्हेन US प्रेसिडेंट विल्सन was trying to join the membership of League of Nations, at that time US Senate did not approve the US joining of League of Nations. इसीलिए League of Nations में US ने ज्वाइन नहीं किया and it was not a member of League of Nations. The Senate must also confirm all appointments as ambassadors to foreign countries and all senior commission in the armed forces of the United States. Again, these are some major powers with the Senate. क्या कर सकते हैं आप कि जितने भी एम्बेसडर्स की अपॉइंटमेंट होती हैं, क्योंकि ये हाई ऑफिसर्स में आ रहे हैं, तो हाई ऑफिसर्स में सेनेट की इम्पोर्टेंस और उनकी अप्रूवल ज़रूरी है. So therefore, when the president is selecting different person for ambassador position, then again these kind of recommendations are gone to the Senate. They are discussed in the Senate, and when the Senate approves that appointment, तब कोई ambassador लग सकता है. अगर Senate ने उसको disapprove कर दिया, किसी ambassador को उन्होंने approve नहीं किया, then remember that ambassador cannot be appointed by the president. And the same way, the commission in the armed forces, जो आर्मी है, जो उनकी armed forces हैं, वहाँ पे भी जो अपॉइंटमेंट होती हैं for different kind of positions, they are to be approved by US Senate. So therefore, meaning that although the Senate shares some powers with the US President, still the US has to rely on the Senate and on the legislature for some of the activities which has to be approved by the legislature. आखिर में जुडिशरी आती है. The judiciary plays a minor role, usually limited to reviewing jurisdiction. कि जहाँ पे कोई फैसले से कोई अदालती काम मुतासर होता हो या यूएस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के खिलाफ हो, तो वहाँ पे जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट है, it can take the case and can see if it is not against the US Constitution and the main principles of US Constitution. Otherwise, the judiciary has a smaller role in the foreign policy. इसके अलावा बाकी जो groups हैं, that affects the foreign policy. So they are domestic and pressure groups. So there are many domestic and pressure groups and vested interests that have interest in foreign policy, and they also affect the foreign policy. These kind of groups include the global corporations, different types of associations. They may be ethnic and religious groups, or there may be some foundations or think tank or scholars और मेजर यूनिवर्सिटीज एट्सेट्रा. तो ये अमेरिका में ऐसे भी ग्रुप्स हैं, ऐसे इस्टेब्लिश्ड प्रेशर ग्रुप्स हैं, इस तरह कुछ थिंक टैंक्स हैं, इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं एंड ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं that they have a role in, not a direct role in foreign policy, but they can put pressure on the executive to adopt a certain policy. वो उसके ऊपर प्रेशर डाल सकते हैं, वो डिफरेंट स्पीचेस के ज़रिए, डिफरेंट कॉन्फ्रेंसेस के ज़रिए, और थ्रू सेमिनार्स, और थ्रू पब्लिक कन्वेसिंग, और थ्रू मीडिया टॉक्स, they can put pressure on the US President and can make the US President or convince the US President to adopt a particular foreign policy towards a particular issue or a state or a country. इसी के साथ public opinion है, which also plays an important role, although it is very rare and it pays less attention to foreign policy matters, but sometime for some major crisis, when it arises the public concern, then it can be a powerful tool in influencing and modifying foreign policy. तो जो अवामी राय दही है, जो अवामी राय है, तो इसका इतना खास मेन रोल तो नहीं है, लेकिन sometime when the issue is very important and the issue catch the people's opinion and the people's attention, so then there can be different types of processions, there can be different types of protest and different types of convincing the president by this public opinion or through the role of media, that the executive is convinced that again it follow or modify some of its foreign policy. तो ये जो public opinion है, इसका भी एक major role है in modifying and affecting the foreign policy. Although it's not a very key role, but sometimes it has influenced the US president to quit one of its foreign policy and brings modification in the foreign policy. जिसमें एक एग्जाम्पल वियतनाम वार की है, जिसमें पब्लिक ओपिनियन रोज अगेंस्ट द प्रेसिडेंट एंड कन्विंस द प्रेसिडेंट दैट यूएस शुड नाउ पुल अवे फ्रॉम द वियतनामीज वॉर बिकॉज दिस इज सर्विंग नो इंटरेस्ट फॉर द यूएस. और इसी पब्लिक प्रेशर के जरिए, इसी पब्लिक ओपिनियन के जरिए द यूएस प्रेसिडेंट वॉज कन्विंस्ड एंड देयरफॉर यूएस वॉज पुल्ड आउट ऑफ द Vietnamese War as a result. Now let us study what are the changes in US foreign policy after World War II. क्योंकि हमने जिस तरह पढ़ा कि World War II से पहले US was adopting a policy of isolation. It was not interested in the politics of other countries. It was not interested in establishing relations and bothering about their problems. But after World War II, the world saw some changes in the US foreign policy. So after World War II, what happened? We saw that, we observed that European powers were weakened due to the destruction caused by World War II. तो जिसकी वजह से यूरोपियन पावर्स खत्म हो गई या कम हो गई. And after World War II, we see Soviet Union and US emerged as a victorious states, and they also emerged as superpowers because they were the victors states. ये जंग जीत चुके थे. क्या हुआ? Conflicting ideologies of the two states bring these two states at a conflict, at a struggle, at some Cold War situation. क्योंकि दोनों में आइडियोलॉजीज का फर्क है, दोनों की कन्फ्लिक्टिंग आइडियोलॉजी है. एक में कैपिटलिज्म है, दूसरे में कम्युनिज्म है, और इसी क्लैश की वजह से दोनों के बीच में कोल्ड वॉर शुरू हुई. So we can see fear and distrust of each other as a threat to other existence. Soviet Union intervention in Eastern Europe and its expansion policy was felt as a serious threat to capitalism, to abolish private property and destruction of its political and social institution. US started active involvement on international level to contain communism and give up a policy of isolation. नजर आ रहा है कि यूएस मजबूर हो रहा है कि अपनी जो आइसोलेशन की पॉलिसी है, वो जो एक तरफ अलग तलग बैठने की पॉलिसी है, उसको ख़त्म कर दे, उसको चेंज कर दिया, उसमें मॉडिफिकेशन ले आए. क्योंकि क्या हो रहा है, कुछ ऐसे खतरात आ रहे हैं जिसकी वजह से यूएस का जो इंटरेस्ट है वो एट स्टेक है, वो खतरे में पड़ गया है. आखिर क्या हो रहा है? हम देख रहे हैं कि सोवियत यूनियन इज एक्सपैंडिंग बिकॉज इट हैज कम्युनिस्टिक फिलॉसफी, and therefore communism was spreading in the Eastern European countries, and America visualized, it thought that if communism was not stopped, so it will soon engulf the countries in the Western Europe as well as then itself. तो इसलिए US मजबूर हुआ कि अपनी पॉलिसीज में चेंज लाए. So US start actively in involvement in Western Europe. And also all types of military and economic aid was given to Europe as well as newly independent countries to prevent their falling to communism. क्योंकि US realize कर रहा है कि अगर उसने कम्युनिज्म को नहीं रोका, so it will soon engulf the whole world. So US started active involvement in its foreign policy. It started giving aid and support to the countries in Western Europe. उनको काफ़ी aid दी गई, जिसमें हमें मार्शल प्लान नजर आ रहा है, जिसमें ट्रूमन डॉक्ट्राइन भी है. एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दीज इंटरवेंशंस वी saw that US was also not giving aid only to the countries in the Western Europe, but also to the countries in Asia and Africa, those countries that were newly developing, that were newly founding, that were gaining independence as a new states. US was also giving them aid ताकि वहाँ पे कम्युनिज्म ना आ सके, कम्युनिज्म को रोका जा सके. तो हम देख रहे हैं कम्युनिज्म की वजह से यूएस मजबूर हुआ कि अपनी जो पॉलिसी ऑफ आइसोलेशन है उसको तर्क कर दे, उसको ख़त्म कर दे और दुनिया में अपनी एक एक्टिव इन्वॉल्वमेंट शो कर दिया. विद दिस वी कम टू द एंड ऑफ टुडेस लेक्चर. वी विल कंटिन्यू फ्रॉम हियर. लेट्स हैव अ शॉर्ट समरी ऑफ टुडेस लेक्चर. डियर स्टूडेंट्स, today we discuss the chapter of US foreign policy, and we discuss what are the major goals of US foreign policy. The major goals are that US foreign policy is aimed at protecting its territorial integrity, अपनी सरहदों की हिफाजत करना. इसी के साथ अपने जो एलाइज हैं, जो अपने दोस्त हैं, जो दोस्त ममालिक हैं, जिसमें वेस्टर्न यूरोप के ममालिक हैं, इसी तरह एशिया में जापान है, साउथ कोरिया है, इसराइल है, तो इनकी सिक्योरिटी, इनकी सरहदों की हिफाजत करना, इनके इंटरेस्ट का हिफाजत करना, सो दिस इज आल्सो टेकन बाय वन ऑफ द मेजर गोल ऑफ यूएस फॉरेन पॉलिसी। इसी के साथ यूएस आल्सो वांट टू एस्टेब्लिश balance of power in the world, so that no country becomes so powerful that it becomes a threat to the security of the other countries. US also tried to foster international security through UN, and therefore UN is being held by United States in all its missions and peacekeeping efforts. America also protect the strategic resources and the access to these strategic assets. US also ensure that there is free navigation and the interest and the international law and the principles are followed and obeyed and regulated by all the states. US also try to protect the trade and business activities and commercial relations with other states and the interest of its businessmen. US also try to promote human rights and democratic principles and ideals, as these form the major goals of US foreign policy. Then we discussed who are involved in US foreign policy, and we discussed that the American system is such that the president is the chief executive, he is the chief diplomat, and there is an office working under him, that is the foreign office establishment, the foreign office staff that assists the US president. ये अपने तरीके से जो भी पॉलिसी बनाता है तो प्रेसिडेंट के पास ये पावर है, उसके पास ये इख्तियार है। सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट आल्सो वर्क्स अंडर यूएस प्रेसिडेंट। इसके बाद जो लेजिस्लेचर है और जुडिशरी है उसके रोल हैं, लेकिन इतने ज़्यादा नहीं है। सबसे अहम रोल जो लेजिस्लेचर का है वो कंट्रोल ऑन द फॉरेन एड है, कंट्रोल ऑन द फाइनेंस है, थ्रू विच इट कैन इन्फ्लुएंस एंड इफेक्ट द फॉरेन पॉलिसी अडॉप्टेड बाय प्रेसिडेंट। इसी तरह जो सेनेट है उसका रोल कुछ ज़्यादा है, बिकॉज द सेनेट हैज़ टू अप्रूव all the treaties, and therefore it can reject any international treaty that it does not like. और इसी तरह Senate also approves all the appointment which are made by US President, such as ambassadors, such as the military positions in the armed forces. और इसी के साथ जो legislature है it can also declare war, which the US President cannot, but again the US President can create situation in which there would be a situation of war, and then the Congress has to go for approval of such a bill. Then other agencies which have a role in US foreign policy is the pressure group, is the vested interest, or different types of organizations, or the universities, और इसी तरह जो public opinion है. So again on some major issue, on some point of concern, it can catch the opinion of the people, and they can put and build pressure on the US President to change or bring modification in the foreign policy. Then we discussed slightly the change in US foreign policy after World War II. And we discussed that because US was adopting a policy of isolation before World War II, it was not interested in the affairs of other countries. Lekin after World War II, when the Soviet Union and United States became powerful states, emerged as superpowers, because of the Soviet Union policy of expansion, because of the expansion communism, US was forced to change its policy. It changed its policy from isolation to interaction, to engagement, so that communism is contained. Communism is not allowed to expand. इसके बाद क्या हुआ? We will continue this in the other lecture. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. I hope you understand. I wish you best of luck. Allah Hafiz.